everyone. Welcome to the eLearning Champions Pod. I'm Shalini, your host for today, and it's a pleasure to introduce today's speaker, someone who's truly passionate about helping adult professionals grow and succeed. Whether in the classroom or in the workplace, her mission is to empower others to reach their career goals. With experience spanning hospitality, retail, public health, government, continuing education, and nonprofits, she brings a rich and diverse perspective to workforce development. Beyond her work, she's deeply engaged in her community, giving her time to causes that she cares about. She's also one of the first professionals in Hawaii and the Philippines to earn the prestigious CPTD certification from the Association for Talent Development. We are very happy to have her with us today. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Gwen. Welcome, Gwen.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Right, so let me dive right into our questions for today. So, based on your experience across industries like hospitality, retail, public health, and government, what are some practical ways L&D professionals can shift from being seen as training providers to strategic business partners? Are there any real world examples where you've successfully made this transition?
So from what your question is basically from training providers to strategic business partners.
Yes, yes.
It's been a while since I've been in an organization. I've been on my own for quite some time, but basically one of the things that they can do is they can learn how to speak C-suite. So basically really get into the business acumen of things, understand what the business bottom line is about, and finding out what the business really cares about and what their main drivers are, whether it's productivity or retention, really trying to make sure that learning and development solves the business's problems. It's not just an order taker. It's not just finding out what next class people can take. It's really how do you use learning and development to drive business factors.
Right, right. And I think that is key to success in this role. Gwen, how do you define the role of a performance consultant in the context of learning and development?
I think that's a really great question. Thank you for asking. So a performance consultant will really not go in and say, I can train your learners on this. A learning performance consultant really goes in and finds out what an organizational problem is all about, determines the root cause of the problem, and then creates a solution and implements a solution that really addresses that problem. So for example, I had a contract in the Philippines where the general manager, the chief operating officer, they asked me to come in and help them fix their guest service problem. And really, it wasn't that the wait staff didn't know how to service a guest. There were some systemic internal issues that were happening on the back end that really were solved just by implementing, like, for example, a CRM. Maybe they did need a little bit of job training, but not to the extent that was originally thought. There were some other systemic issues that were causing some of the guest service issues they were experiencing. So one of them being that they didn't really have a robust customer relationship management system. And so that was one of the recommendations that I made, was to really implement that. And what they saw was that their guest scores actually did increase a little bit, just by kind of doing that. So training is not always the answer. When you're a performance consultant, that is not the first answer that you go to. What you really want to do is you want to create a solution that addresses the root cause of the problem rather than
Right,
just applying training to it, which is just a band-aid.
right. That's very well put, Gwen. Uh, this is a slightly difficult area sometimes for us to handle when when we are trying to prove the strategic importance of training. And sometimes, when we get an opportunity, I think L&D professionals just dive in and go ahead with, laying out the training solution without really, as you said, addressing the root cause. So, do you have any recommendations for L&D professionals to, take that step back? Because it doesn't come easy for many of us who, actually struggle to get to that place where we are being heard by the C-suite. And
Mm-hmm.
then to tell them that, okay, you know what, training is not really the problem is sometimes difficult to articulate. So,
Mm-hmm.
what do you recommend? How do you recommend L&D professionals go about this?
One of the things that I do when I'm actually with a client is that one of the first things I do is I actually ask them, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? So if you want me to do this training, what exactly is the problem that you're trying to solve? Whether it's customer service or presentation skills, or whether it's something that is going on in terms of productivity, what exactly is the problem? And what do you think is causing the problem? Because it's only until you find out what's causing the problem that we can figure out if in order for me to be successful, I need to figure out what the problem is and that we're trying to solve. And once I know that problem, then I can implement a solution that is tailored to that problem that really
Mhm.
helps them in terms of moving the needle forward in whatever direction they want to go, whether it's decreasing customer complaints or whether it's increasing team productivity. It really depends upon what the problem is, and I can't come up with a particular solution until I know what the problem is. Otherwise, I will just be kind of, spinning my wheels trying to come up with a solution that may or
Right.
may not solve your problem. So that needs analysis, that needs discovery call, or that needs discovery conversation is really the key to coming up with a solution that will solve your problem. So I will rarely ever just, when my clients call me, I will rarely ever say, okay, yeah, I'll do this training for you. Unless it's really something that they're, like it's a one-off, they're doing a workshop on, for example, disability inclusion. That I can,
Right.
I can, I can understand. It's a particular workshop or it's an offsite or whatever. But if they're actually trying to solve a performance problem, really need to figure out what the causes of that problem before you move forward.
Right, right. Yeah, thank you for that, Gwen. And as you said, it actually leads up to my next question on training needs. But before that, a very quick question. Do you think every L&D professional is primarily also a performance consultant or should be?
I think so. I think it's really a key to understanding that C-suite speak, if you know, because if you're just an order taker, then you are a cost factor in the
Right,
business, and you may be dispensable, especially when costs start getting cut. But if you
right,
position yourself as a strategic partner who helps solve problems, then chances are that you will be seen in a different light. And so I think really, and that actually is part of, if you think about it, it's part of the ADDIE process, right?
right.
Analysis, design, develop, implement, evaluate.
Mhm.
Performance consulting is actually built into the very fabric of a lot of instructional design projects, a lot of training implementation projects. So I think it's just interwoven naturally. I think just concentrating on that rather than just taking orders can actually go a long way.
Right, right. Thank you for that. So you've already touched upon, the training needs analysis part of it, but just wanted to hear a little bit more from you about it. You work with a wide range of industries. So, how do you adapt your approach to training needs analysis to fit different organizational cultures and business objectives? And what challenges have you encountered? And, well, how did you overcome them?
Now, one of the things that my career has taken me, as you said, my career has taken me throughout many, many different places. And one of the things that I really had to learn quickly is how uh, how the industry actually operates. So each industry has different learning, challenges, different culture issues, and each organization is different as well. So I really try to take a step back a little bit and learn what are the problems that I have been hired to solve, and what does the culture have to do with it? What does I mean? Even if if it could be a different country, it could be a different organization, it could be a different industry. Every single organization you come into is going to have nuances and differences of what their needs are. That
Right.
actually has served me very well in terms of being able to transition from, in my early career, I was a retail trainer, and then I transitioned to training healthcare professionals for public health for a state
Right.
government department. So I really took the time to learn the business per se. So I didn't just come in and say, okay, well, we're going to do this training program. I really did come in and try to learn the business. So that's why I tried to become as much of a, not as a subject matter expert per se, but as knowledgeable in the subject as possible to help me gain credibility. So for example, when you're talking about retail, you really want to know the products, you really want to know, the customer service aspect of it. And then when I transitioned to healthcare, it was, okay, well, in particular, I worked with immunization. So now I know way more about vaccines than I thought I would ever know, but I really took the time to learn what it is that they
Right.
were trying to accomplish in the department, in their agency, in their field. And that really helped me establish credibility with them in terms of that. It is a challenge because sometimes you want to jump in right away and start solving problems, but until you really understand the nuances of each client and each organization that you belong to, I usually try to give myself a month. So I will usually ask. Sometimes I'll ask, but I've gotten into the habit of asking, Kate, can you give me a couple of weeks at least to research and to really learn what this business is all about? I mean, obviously
Right.
you do your research before the interview and all that other
Mm-hmm,
stuff
mm-hmm.
before you come to the first call, but really taking the time to learn what that client, their mission, their vision, their values, what they're trying to accomplish, the product, the services that they provide really does go a long way in helping to implement problems, solving problems that they have.
Right, right. So, as part of your research, who are the various audiences you reach out to, when you're
Depends
doing
on
your
the
DNA?
it depends on the organization. So sometimes it will be holding customer focus groups. Sometimes it will be employees are a really big factor. I really am a big believer that the front line is the core of every organization's
Right.
workforce. And so I really do take a lot of time to talk to workforce employees, the frontline workers, the frontline supervisors. I try to find out what their views are of the problem at hand, and because usually sometimes they have the solutions, they're just not being heard. And so
Right.
really taking the time to talk to them because they're the ones that have their ear on what the customer is saying. They're the ones who really know the days in, the days out, the nitty gritty, the details of what may or may not be working in the organization. So that is one key focus group that I usually will talk to. I'll also talk to, I'll also talk to managers, the C-suite themselves to find out what the problem is, those types of things.
Right, right. So, Gwen, that's key. Talking to the frontline workers, the actual recipients, the ones who are going to go through the training. But sometimes, we tend to just stop at talking to the C-suite and the managers. So, talking to the actual end users of your training is really key. But a lot of times we end up just gaining our, you know, doing a survey and, getting our insights from just the first line managers and the C-suite. Now, this is a huge group, the actual employees who are going to take your training. So, do you have any recommendations on how you would go about setting up these focus groups and, just some best practices based on your experience?
Well, I've worked for large corporations before, but as a frontline supervisor. In terms of learning and development, and working with my clients, my sweet spot is usually small to mid market. So in terms of like the large corporations, I would not be the best person to answer that question. But in terms of the small to mid market organizations, it's really asking, the managers, it's asking for volunteers who would like to be involved in this particular endeavor, and b also asking managers for their input on who would be a good person to talk to. So
Right.
that's usually how I go about selecting people. But usually people are eager to talk. So I really don't ever have a shortage of volunteers asking to talk to me.
Great. Great. Thank you. Now, coming to the next question. In sectors like hospitality and retail, where our training impact is often measured in terms of, customer experience, um, what metrics and data points, have you found to be most effective in demonstrating ROI to stakeholders?
Can you repeat the question?
Um, you know, Training is usually measured. especially in sectors like hospitality and retail, training impact is often measured in terms of an improvement in customer experience.
Mm.
Um, so, what metrics and data points have you found, effective in demonstrating ROI to stakeholders?
Well, definitely it's revenue could be one because the more happy a customer is, the more they shop, right?
Right.
The more they come back, the more they do it. Guest service scores are also another good indicator.
Hmm.
When you do your guest service surveys, are they positive? Do they come back? So really how hold, pushing the needle up and down on that one. Those are two of the metrics that I look at the most. Other metrics that you could look at are employee satisfaction because when employees are happy, customers are happy.
Right.
So those are the big three that I can think of at this time.
Right. Right. I think employee satisfaction is something that, is not measured as frequently or, as we would like to measure, because sometimes we just gather all these other metrics and leave out this very core group. So,
Hmm.
what recommendations do you have for, the frequency, or how do you go about measuring employee satisfaction? Do you partner very closely with HR? You know, is it a co-owned area, so to speak?
Um, I think it depends on the organization. I honestly have not how do I say this? Well, it depends on the organization. So when you're talking about an employee focus group, really depends upon because sometimes L&D itself in an organization will fall under HR and sometimes it will
Right,
fall under
right,
operations. So it really
right,
depends upon who is the champion of the project, who is the one who is asking you to solve the problem. Is it the chief operating officer? Is it the chief human resources officer? Because you're going to
right,
approach it differently depending upon who's asking you to solve the problem. And in
right,
terms of employee satisfaction, there are a couple ways. I mean, the usual 360 employee feedback, but really holding employee focus groups, you can look at it in terms of turnover, in terms of retention, in terms of just talking, just even observing the employees when they come to work. Do they come to work happy or do they come to work kind of a little bit grumpy? That
right,
could really determine whether or not somebody is feeling their job or not.
right, right. So, Gwen, do you believe that L&D truly has a very key role to play in employee retention?
I do because if you take the time, because a part of L&D is very broad, right? So some of it, again, it could be part of HR, some of it could be part of, um, operations. But at the very core of it, learning and development is about helping that person reach their full potential in whatever job that you hire them for. And so,
Right,
really, onboarding is really key to starting that. So from the even before they show up on their first day, how are you welcoming that person? How are you preparing that person for success? And there's always going to be some bit of learning that they have to do on the job, whether that's on the job training, whether that's in the classroom, whether that's through e-learning, virtual instructor led learning. There's always some learning that they have to do in whatever form it is, even if it's a job aid that just shows them how to do their job. They are going to come with a certain amount of experience that you have to respect and
right,
you have to draw on because that's the reason why you hired them for the job. But really it's a key role because it helps determine how that person is going to be treated and how that person's potential is going to be treated. I mean, for the last, I guess 5 to 10 years, I guess one of the top benefits that employees look for is how far can I go in this company? What's my growth potential? So really, you can't have growth potential if you don't have a learning and development function that helps them reach that potential.
right, right. Thank you for that insightful response. Okay, now coming to technology's role in learning. So many of the industries that you've worked in rely on frontline employees who may not have constant access to traditional e-learning platforms. So, what strategies or technologies do you recommend to ensure effective learning for, how shall I say, deskless workers?
For deskless workers,
Mhm.
it depends again on what they're trying to train them, because there are
Right,
some things that cannot be done outside of a classroom. So, for example, a physical skill like CPR or first aid, you're
Right.
going to need to have some kind of classroom component to that. But mobile technology has really opened up the doorway and the gateway. A lot of employees actually now have their mobile phones, or they're given mobile
Right.
phones by their employer. So mobile learning is actually, I think, one of the best things that has come out in the last 15 to 20 years in terms of helping open that gateway up to deskless workers. And I've seen some really fancy technology things. I mean, that's why at restaurants now, the servers can input things directly, into a handheld device rather than going to a
Right.
POS system. Just things like that. I think that the potential is there. And then I'm not an AI expert by any means, but I think the advent of AI and artificial intelligence is really going to be a game changer in the way that learning and development is done in the next, they say the next 5 to 10 years. So I think that that's something that employers should keep an eye out on, because it'll affect everything from productivity to operations to learning and development. To pretty much, it'll touch every function within an organization.
Right. Right. So, what are some of your thoughts on AI's potential in L&D? Especially in industries with high turnover rates like retail and hospitality. How can we really leverage AI to design and deliver learning experiences? Just your
Mm,
thoughts.
My thoughts on that. Actually, I'm still learning that myself. I'm not an AI expert. I can point you in the direction of people who are. There's several learning and development experts out there who are also at the forefront of artificial intelligence and incorporating that into organizations. And so I'm not the best person to answer that question, but my thoughts are, just from personally my own personal work,
Hmm.
is that it's making certain things faster, but at the same time you can't really remove that human element altogether. So
Right.
you can put into AI, give me a 2-hour course on such and such, and it will spit it out. But is it quality? Maybe, maybe not. Will it fit what problem is that they're trying to solve? Maybe, maybe not. And I think that's where really having the human side of it and the human, investigation part of it that really determines what the problem is. AI is not going to fix that, because AI doesn't know what the source of the problem is. It could actually make recommendations, but it's not going to know the true source of the problem, at least from what I've seen,
Right.
until because a human is always going to drive AI. AI doesn't make
Absolutely.
decisions on its own. A human is always going to drive that. So I kind of I'm kind of on the later end of approaching and using AI in my own business. So again, I'm not the best person to answer that, but what I've seen a lot more organizations adopting it and trying to adopt it. It's very fast moving. It's very, there's definitely some ethical things involved in that. Again, I can point you in the direction of people who do know more about this subject than I do. But from my own business and my own perspective, it definitely has helped me with productivity. It's helped me with instructional design in terms of just prompting ideas. So, for example, if I'm at a loss of how to develop a 2-hour training on, rocket science, for example,
Right.
I could
Right.
ask it to give me the key points of rocket science, and it will give me all of those things. It will even give me an outline. Do I have to use that outline? No, but can I use it to prompt ideas on what to create? Yes.
Right. Right. I think a lot of us have used AI as a brainstorming partner.
Hmm.
So yeah, that totally makes sense. Uh, Coming to one final question, Gwen. Um, this is to do around, staying current and building a sustainable L&D career. You've earned the prestigious CPTD certification and you continue to pursue higher education. So, for L&D professionals looking to grow their expertise and stay relevant, what strategies or learning pathways do you recommend?
I think it depends on the individual and what they want to accomplish. Do they want to become the chief learning officer, or do they want to become an instructional designer? There's a lot of teachers, especially here in the States right now, that are actually transitioning into corporate L&D. They're
Mm-hmm.
leaving the education field behind and they're transitioning. How do they use their previous experience as teachers to leverage their new careers? So it really depends on the individual. Now, I have earned the CPT from the Association for Talent Development. So they're actually an organization that's really near and dear to my heart. They've really helped me learn what I need to learn, and they've been really instrumental in my career. So one of the things that they have that I usually recommend to somebody who's trying to figure out their career pathway is they actually have a self-assessment that is in line with their current capability model, and it will
Mm-hmm.
actually pull up a career pathway for you. It will have some recommendations for you depending upon what your goals are. So those are some of the things. And then also keeping in touch with the current publications that are out there, like Training Magazine's a great resource. Training
Right.
Industry is a really great resource. The Learning Guild, really great resources. So just really trying to keep up on terms of, read your industry magazines, go to classes, further your education, go to conferences, if you can afford to. So whatever you can do to learn what you need to learn to keep your career moving forward is a great strategy for everybody. But in terms of specifics, really depends upon what your individual goals are.
Right. Right. Thank you for sharing that about the resources we can go to and the self-assessment test. That sounds really interesting. So does that come with an ATD subscription?
Um, I I am not sure. I think you can take the self-assessment without being a member. I will have to
Mhm.
double check on that. Do not quote me on that. But I believe the self-assessment, I believe, is open to pretty much everybody. I do not believe that you have to be a member in order to take it. They do recommend that you do take it, uh, every once in a while. I mean, I haven't taken it in a while, but it is a really robust, it's a self-assessment. So it really does kind of gauge your knowledge on, certain capabilities like business acumen, cultural awareness, intelligence, everything that has to do with, the three capabilities that they have, which is one's personal, one's professional, one's organizational.
Right, right. So Gwen, I just want to ask one final question. You
Sure.
talked about acumen and those kind of skills. Now, what can you recommend some skills that, not the hard skills of instructional design and uh, you know, consulting and all of that, but can you recommend some soft skills that you feel L&D professionals should invest in to grow their career? It could be financial business acumen, for instance, as you said. So, what are your favorite top three skills that you feel every L&D professional should have?
I definitely think emotional intelligence.
Yes, totally
Um,
agree.
Presentation skill or communication skills, really not
Hmm.
so much presentation skills, but emotional intelligence, communication skills, and the business acumen, I think are three key ones.
Right. Thank you so much. And thank you for sharing all those insights and, based on your experience. And I'm sure our listeners have benefited from this podcast and you've given us all a lot of food for thought. So
Thank you very
thank you
much
once
for
again,
having me.
Gwen. Yeah, and listeners, do stay tuned for our upcoming podcasts. Thank you once again, Gwen. It was a pleasure to
Thank you very
talk to
much.
you.
Thank you.